Hi there, and welcome to today's episode. Today, we have fantastic guest that I've known from LinkedIn for a while, and I watched his content and I followed his journey and I learned from him. And every single time I've seen a post from him, I was like, I would love to have a chat with this guy. I would love to know a little bit more about him because what I'm seeing so far, it's incredible, it's inspirational, and I know that you, our viewers or listeners, will love it as well. So let me give a warm welcome to Mark Carolan, who is a transformational life executive and public speaking coach. He's also a corporate well-being coach and consultant and licensed NLP practitioner. He has spent many years in senior management across international organizations, and he brings that expertise now into the work he does as a coach. But aside from this kind of a bio that we can tell you about him, he is also such an insightful, wonderful person. We talked about things such as positivity, the magic of being yourself, and how to come home to ourselves, about how we can take control and we can change our lives and we can achieve anything and possibilities. And Mark tells us a couple interesting stories, like he's a wonderful storyteller. So without any further ado, I will stop rambling and let's get into the conversation.
But before we start the conversation, I just want to remind you about our Patreon account. And this is a place where you put all our really wonderful and inspiring gold nuggets. It is a new group that we are trying to build. It's a community, and we are also putting out content that we've got a couple of years ago from some amazing guests, just little snippets of wisdom that they are sharing. And this is where you can get them without having to scroll through hundreds of episodes to get to one. We are putting those really little bite-sized bits in as well so that you've got easier access. There's a free part to this to Patreon, and there is a paid version. The paid version is where you will get content from Link and myself, as well as the gold nuggets. The free version is where you get these bite sides and a couple of articles as they're growing. So do come and be part of the community. Come and support us as we are growing and developing and finding some amazing guests for you. But now let's carry on with our conversation with Mark.
Hi, Mark. Welcome.
Hi, Elenka. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Welcome. We love to have you here. So grateful for you to make the time to chat with us. So tell us a bit more about you. It's always, the bio, it's a transformational coach, just train this, it's train that. But tell us a little bit more about, what do you do and what inspires you in life and what got you on this path of, transformational coaching?
Um, it's a great question. It's a long question. It's a long answer to it. I'm going to start by going a lawful long way back, Lenka. I'm going to start by going the whole way back to I am a shopkeeper by trade. So when I grew up, my gran had a shop across the road from us. And it was a little family shop, small shop in the middle of the country. And we were always in her house. So we were always there. And so you started working in the shop from the age of 6 years old, standing at the counter, walking up and serving the customers. And for me, it was an incredibly grounding experience because I learned how to speak to people. I learned how different people are because I knew people then who were kids coming into the shop, who were parents of the kids I knew, who were the grandparents of the kids I knew, the old people in the area. And for me, the shop was a public service as much as it was a shop. So people would come to exchange news, to exchange what was going on, just to meet each other because they knew they'd come at the same time. And I always loved the impact that had. And I think for me, that had a lasting relationship throughout my life in terms of how much I enjoy people. Like everyone who come into the shop, you'd had to learn how to speak and how to get people going in conversation because you were standing there serving customers and doing basic things. And so you would really begin to find out what was going on, asking them some interesting questions. And so I think I've kind of carried that through my career with me. When I went into, I've had a lot of jobs, and if you saw a poster the other day where I think I listed about 27 different jobs in my life, but the main one I actually did as an adult in a serious job was working in the corporate world. And I kind of carried that interest in people into it, and interest in making sure people were okay and getting what they needed. Even though my role as a manager, my role as a senior manager was to drive production and make sure things were happening in the way they needed to be. But the thing that kept me in the corporate world so long was because I loved people and I loved managing people. And I loved that space where I was getting to coach people and help them be the best version of themselves. And I suppose that's kind of what I took with me from that space into the space I work with now, into the space of coaching.
That's awesome. I love when we get to know a bit of the background, when we really understand, yes, it's not just your coach and you have some certification and you have some specialty and you work with certain people, but where does it come from? And it's awesome to hear the story of, working in a shop, getting curious about people, talking with people of all walks of life and everything. But I would still love to then drill a little deeper into what it is that you then do right now with your clients, be it one-to-one, with corporate, with trainings, all sorts of things that you do. What is the one thing that you see common across the board that people, teams, individuals, companies, professionals tend to be struggling with, or that they
Mm,
helping with? Because I'm sure there will be some similarities, there will be some patterns that you're noticing that you've been doing this work for years now, and maybe it's evolving. What have been the common challenge 5 years ago might have transformed to something else. I would love to know a little bit more about your experience right now, hands-on, helping people.
okay, it's a great question. And it is very interesting how it has changed and how I have changed in it because one of the things I love most about what I do is I am never not learning. Oh my goodness. Like when you're in a space where you're speaking to someone and you're holding that space so that they can be absolutely honest. And it's not me they're being honest with, they're being honest with themselves. That's the reality of it. And so you're experiencing their truth all the time. And look, we have so many conversations in life, we have so many relationships, but how often is that conversation just pure, raw truth? It's so rare that's why it's such a pleasure and an absolute privilege for me to be in that space. So it allows me to learn all the time. I'm always reflecting after a coaching session, going, wow, we brought me to that space. And sometimes I'm taking notes on the side of the page going, I need to examine that for myself. That's not for here today, but that's for what needs to go on too. And I think so as I've done this, and one of the reasons, one of the things that I've always loved is motivating people. So I do that through talks or do that through the coaching. When you say are people's challenges different, I think look, COVID had such an impact on us psychologically, on us mentally. There's a deep impact we haven't really come to terms with yet. Like we suddenly got this sense of this is a strange thing to say. We got this sense of freedom. Yet our physical space was restricted, but suddenly we had freedom in time for the first time because we didn't have to, I have to be there, you have to be there, you have to go to this, you have to attend this. Suddenly we were like, oh my God, I'm free. And for a lot of people, that was liberating. They suddenly went, oh my God, what will I do with my time? How can I use that time? And I think the world suddenly sped back up to where it was very, very quickly without actually anyone taking a breath. Suddenly, oh, we're back. We're doing it again. And I know some people, there's a bit more working from home and stuff. But I find now from where I started with the coaching is that a lot of people are really kind of, they got a glimpse of themselves. They got a sense of who they were and they've lost it again. And they're kind of like, is this me? And, is there more to my life than what it is? Is it my job? Is it my career? What am I trying to be or who am I trying to be? Because we're trying to play these roles all the time, the role of boss, the role of parent, the role of friend, whatever it is. But we aren't in those roles. And it's that for me, an awful lot of it. And this is where I really go with a lot of people. I help them figure out who they really are. To try, let's pull back. Let's pull back the stories. Let's pull back the belief systems. Let's find the truth. And then when we find that truth of who they really are, then we can start rebuilding from that space. Start creating the life they want. And that's just marvelous. Like that's fun.
And you perfectly kind of segued into one of the things that was also on my mind, knowing that you did TEDx talk exactly on this topic of the
Mm.
magic of being yourself and, your philosophy of how we get better at life by learning to come home to ourselves. So tell us a little bit more about, what it is that we all could do to find more about ourselves and come home to ourselves. Are there any prompts or questions or exercises or systems that you use that you could share with us and our listeners to allow us to tap into the magic of being ourselves a bit more?
Okay, that's a great question, Lenka. And I want to bring it back to like the journey that I've been on my entire life started very, very young, trying to understand myself and trying to understand what the world was all about. And like I go right back, and I was even talking to somebody about this yesterday. I can go right back to Catholic upbringing in Ireland in the country, and the entire family crammed into a small car, including my granny, my brother in the lying across the back window because there was no other space. This is back in the 80s in Ireland, and going to mass, and the priest would give his sermon, and they'd read the gospel and he'd give this big sermon, and I'd be sitting there going, okay, what's he trying to tell me? What's the information? What's going on here? Then I'd get back into the car and I would start dissecting the sermon. And I would start pulling it apart and going, yeah, but I don't see where he's going with this. This doesn't make sense. I was about 7 or 8 at this point. And I would be doing it every Sunday until one Sunday my dad just went, listen, Mark, could you do us a favor? Could you just stop? Just stop talking, please. And I was like, but it dawned on me then. It really dawned on me. Nobody else was listening. Okay, other people might have been, but no one in my car was listening. Everyone was in their own space doing their own thing. So if we were there to have a communal experience, how were we all in our own space doing our own thing? And it kind of brought me to that idea that, it's not about what anyone else is doing, it's about what you do and what you take from this kind of piece. And that's like the magic of being yourself. Like, so coming home to yourself has kind of always been my philosophy around that coaching piece. And it's it for me, it's the essence of what the truth is for our lives. Like when you meet someone who's authentic, when you meet someone who's really absolutely authentically themselves, you gravitate towards them. It's like you want to have a conversation with them. You're just your energy is just it's something you want. Unless you meet someone who's so authentic, they're showing you parts of yourself you don't want to see. And then you run from them. And then you would attack them because you're not ready for that yet either. And one of the reasons why we struggle with this idea of coming home to ourselves is because we're not ready for it. Because we've been on this journey, we've created all these ways of being in our way for so long for our entire life that we're not ready to be this actual person that we actually need to be in order to start feeling good about life. How many people tell you, I'm not happy, I'm miserable, this isn't working right for me, Why? Who else's fault is it? It's not because the world is built a certain things can happen that can be very difficult to deal with, of course. Life has its own challenges. But it's still our responsibility to deal with them. We cannot control the stuff that's external to us. We can only control who we are. But yet we spend our lives building these external blocks. And there's a that TED talk I gave, right? There was probably about an hour in the TED talk. I had to do it in 15 minutes. So it killed me editing that thing down. I wouldn't mind. I didn't even have the end until I was driving up the day before to do it. But and there's a part of it that I really wanted to do where I get this impression, it was great that we're on video, and I was like, the ego stand there, the ego has the fists up, and the ego's, come on, I'll defend you, I'll defend you. And I want to do this impression. If you put your hand on your shoulder of the ego and just say, you know what, it's all right, I got this. I've got this. It's okay. I can deal with this now. Because the ego is just there to help us. It's there to protect us. It's there to keep us what we deems as safe because we've set it up for so long. And when you say, what's the thing we can do, is start to trust that we're actually safe. We're actually safe. It's safe to be ourselves. I'm not saying like you can be the most vulnerable person in the world and suddenly start telling the entire world exactly what's going on for you. Hold on a second. You have to build up to being that level of authentic about who you are. But we're a lot more safe than we think. And maybe the question that people need to start examining if they want to go into that journey is like, am I really in trouble here? Am I really in danger? Because that safety is so important. That psychological safety is so important for us to be able to grow and develop. Because when we begin to feel safe, we begin to learn to accept ourselves. And then we can begin to have compassion for ourselves as a result of the self-acceptance. And from that space, we really, really blossom and grow because we can really begin to understand how we are enough in this world.
But it also sounds like, at least to me, it makes me think, yes, wonderful. It sounds awesome. I want to be safe. I want to come home to myself. I want everyone to embrace this. But we live in a, like, I don't want to say scary world because I don't see it as a scary world, but the media, the culture, the
Mm,
politics, the people around us, the conversations, the things happening. I was talking with a friend this morning about that our nervous system is on such a level of activation, of alertness,
mm,
on subconscious subliminal nervousness about what is happening with us, with our livelihoods, with the cost of living, with politics, with everything on the planet. So even though it's wonderful to hear what you're saying, and it's possible to come to safety and it's possible to be more vulnerable and find more peace, I'm also questioning, how many people will also have this reaction that I've had of, but the world is scary and there's so much danger and there's so much negativity coming at us. How do we manage?
I would ask, what can we control of all that stuff that's coming at us? Like, it's not us that's creating it, but we are reacting to it instead of choosing our response to it. And I know I get caught up in it sometimes. I'll be reading about, genocide on the Palestinians and getting angry and frustrated. And suddenly you cloud your vision of the world by what's going on. We all look, American politics has such an impact on the rest of the world. We all watch it, and we all get media from one side which tells us the other side is bad. But then suddenly you're speaking to people who support the other side and they make it a bit of sense and they're going, well, do you know what? It's a lot of different opinions. So what's safe and what's not safe in these spaces? And I think we have a duty as a community to do our best in our community and to try and create a world that's safe for people coming and people coming after us and the generations that are to come. But we have a duty to ourselves to understand that that's not within our span of control. It's not within our span of control, this media and the news. And like, as hard as it can be and as radical as it may seem, if the world and the media is giving you all this negativity, we can turn off the media. Like, we have that choice, we have that power. We don't have to pay attention. Or if we do pay attention to it as information instead of the emotion it's trying to create in us. How is it trying to make us feel? Like, it's sometimes we don't critically analyze situations enough. So we'll tell a story, and news is news media. It's entertainment now, It's like it's competing with The Sopranos. It's competing with, oh, God knows I can't think of a more modern TV program right off the top of my head. I still can't. The Yellowstone. That was one, right? But it's competing with big drama that is trying to make us feel a certain way. So we're intrigued. What's going to happen next? And it's creating that sense in us. And yet it's supposed to be real, as opposed to something we know is just a TV program we're watching. When we turn it off, these characters, that nothing real has happened to them. Yet this is real. But is it actually real is the question we have to ask ourselves. Or is it a narrative that we're being told and we're taking the emotion of it? So for us, our power is in not engaging in that way and actually stepping back and going, well, hold on a second. How does this impact me as a person? How does it impact me calling my friend and saying, do you want to do something? How does this impact me going out for a walk? Like, I live a few minutes from the beach and I'm standing on the beach and I'm watching the waves coming in and out. And political situations don't matter very much in that situation. And look, I know I'm from a privileged position and I mentioned some harrowing things at the start there. Like, so they're in a very different position. But I think for us, it behoves us not to get caught up in the wrong way because we're not. We're actually not. And I know the fight or flight thing is such a massive thing in our world, but I want to mention it in the TED talk. Like, we have this stress, and I'll happily talk about that much more from a work perspective as well. We have this stress that builds up on us, and we see it as that fight or flight. We need to run, but we don't need to run. We just need to examine what it is, what's it trying to tell us, and then we can just settle it and move on in the right way.
I love how you're talking about, connecting with yourself. And one of my favorite words is humanness. It's reconnecting with our own humanness that's in us and talking about coming back to you and finding out what you want. And when I'm saying you, I mean us as each of us as individuals. And I like how you're talking about, what do we do with all this information that we are getting bombarded with, essentially. You can get news 24/7 and not just the sort of legacy media type thing, but all on YouTube, on Substack, on Patreon, anywhere you can go on the internet, on MS, you can Google news and you can get bombarded with. And as you said, it is a source of entertainment almost. It is designed to instill fear, to instill scarcity and uncertainty, because they never tell you all the good news that's going on. And the Harley Davidson tattooed scary looking guy who helped the little old lady across the road and did a birthday party for kids. You don't get the good stuff, you get the awful stuff, because it is designed, as us as humans, we almost thrive on drama and this fear, and so it becomes like this addiction. What's going on in the world? And like you said, it's you standing on the beach and watching the waves coming in and going out. What has the rest of the world got to do with you in that moment? And so I think it's quite valuable that you're sharing about finding what can we do right now. We don't have control over anything that's going on in the world. It's not up to us. I mean, we don't have the control of it. We're not politicians. We're not don't have huge amounts of money unless you have somewhere underneath your mattress. But I'm assuming that you just an average human being wanting to create the best life for yourself and your
Mm.
family. So we can't control all those things that are going on in the world, but we can control what's going on in our world, and we can control how we are reacting to that and
Mhm.
what we are doing to reconnect with us, reconnect with the human, but also finding ways, how can we do something within our communities, within our families, in our little bubble. Because I also think that little bubbles spread. It's almost like you're the pebble that gets thrown into that still lake, and you get all those ripples that come out. So what I'm gathering is, instead of looking out there at all that scary stuff that's happening, well, first of all, we have the choice, as you said, to turn it off.
Mm.
But second of all, is let's be the pebble in our community and spread out the good ripples. And you don't know how far that's going to go. You don't know
Mhm.
how far that's going to reach, but we can help our neighbor. We might not be able to help people in Uganda or Uruguay or anywhere else, but we can help our neighbor,
Mhm.
because well, it's closer. Neighbors, well, unless you're in the country, you might not have a neighbor, but my neighbor is literally the next has the same wall as me. So the thing is, it's not focused on out there, but focused on more here. Close by. Is that sort of making sense? Am I
Yeah,
on the
look,
right track?
yeah, 100%, Natalie. I suppose growing up, like again, foundationally, and I think for a lot of us, we take our foundations from when we're very young in many aspects. And if those foundations are negative, we spend a lifetime trying to break them down. But even if they aren't negative, we still spend a lifetime trying to break down the wrong things we took from them. But my father was a great example in he used to always say that, he had his family, and that was the people who lived in the house. He had his other family, that was his relations, anyone he was related to, and then he had his third family, and that was the community he lived in. And he used to always, say that to us all the time at home. And he was involved in every single thing. He was chairman of any single organization, but he would always do things the right way. And his reasoning was very much that the example I give is the example I want people to follow in that way, and that's really the learning in it. Like, I was even talking on LinkedIn today about an incident where someone had a title and they didn't live up to the title, and what does that mean? And it just means that, title does not dictate behavior. Your actions dictate your behavior, and your actions can inspire or your actions can, cause negativity. And that's a choice that we make in how we act and what we do. Where I live at the moment, like, the Gaelic football will be a local Indigenous Irish game, and there's great community around it all the time, and it's lovely to see, and it's built in community because as a country, our community would have been built around the church probably 20 years ago, but that's gone. It's disappearing. It's probably about time the control they had was too much and they're falling in its own way. And so that has become the main source of community, and there's a lot of good that comes out of it, And one of the ways that, like, we've had an awful lot of people come into Ireland in the last 30 years, or 20 years, when Ireland, got wealthy, and which didn't suit us at all, I should say, in the 2000s. And the way a lot of their kids have integrated is they now play Indigenous sports, and they're now there in that community, and they don't see any difference in it because it's just all part of the same thing. And isn't that the key? Like, when we look at the news, it's all about division. It's all about you or them. It's never about we're all the same. We're all on the same planet, just hurtling through space, just trying to make the best of it, as opposed to, oh, they've got this and you've got that. And I think that's one of the hardest things for us to understand is we've lost curiosity for the people who have a different opinion to us. We've shut them down. We've put them into a box. We say, no, you are that side. You think that, therefore I can't speak to you. As opposed to, why do you think that? What's the reason why you think that? Because we're of way more interest to each other than we let each other know. And I think one of the things that we can begin to make changes in our culture and in ourselves is through curiosity. Where there's no curiosity, there's no growth.
And we've actually had guests before speaking about curiosity
Okay.
and starting to ask questions. And like you said, and especially since COVID, and I know it was a little bit before, but COVID really hit that divide. And it's as you said, it's them or us. It's you or you. There is this divide, and I think part of coming back to the human is that connection. I mean, we are built for tribe. We built to be connected. We as the saying goes, no man is an island.
Hmm.
And even me as an introvert, I'm like, yeah, I get that. I like being on my own and in my own little island, but I also appreciate community and connection because as going down into, as Len was mentioning, the nervous system and our hormones, we need that connection. We need that sense of community. We need others around us to support us, guide us, just be there with us, and I think the sense of divide has really brought in a lot of loneliness and a lot of sort of disconnect. And coming back to that human is creating that reconnect, reconnect with people. And if they don't believe the same things as you or think the same way, doesn't that add more dynamics and different perspectives to your relationship or to your life? I mean, if we were all exactly the same, I think life would be totally boring because there would be no discussion, no argument, no debate. But
Yeah.
through the differences, you can create connection and just have that sense of, okay, you believe the sky's that color. I believe it's this color, but you know what? What do we have that's in common? Well, we both believe the grass is green. Well, there we go. We have that commonality. And just because we're different doesn't mean that there isn't something in common if we look for it and if
Yeah.
we nurture it and find ways to connect instead of disconnecting.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The truth of it is that there's always something in common. There's a lovely little uh, story that I love for how we could all be the same, and it's from I don't know if you remember Bishop Desmond Tutu was the bishop in Archbishop in South Africa during apartheid. And he was, I think it was in Mozambique. He was in one neighboring country, and he was visiting. And there was a huge, big court case at the time where some fella had murdered two people. And at his press conference in Mozambique, he was asked a question about your man, and he was asked to condemn him, to condemn this murderer. And Bishop Desmond Tutu, he said, well, maybe if I was in his shoes, I would have killed those two people as well. I thought like that was a brave answer, but it was a startling answer. And I just think from that day forward, I have called myself a tutoist because I like the idea that, we don't really know what's going on in someone else's space. We don't really know. Like I learned this early on as a coach when I'd be working with someone very, very early on, and I'd be like, well, maybe you should do this. And then they go, why? Why would I do that? Doesn't suit me at all. And I realize, oh, wait a second, that's my experience. Hold on, sorry. Who are you? What's going on for you? Where are you? And then we get back into understanding and seeing the other person, which is what I'm there for, to allow them to express. And that's the interesting thing because we are all so very interesting. I've never met a human who isn't interesting. And I'll give you a little story on that. I was doing a talk it was an addiction treatment center. I was giving a talk, I was doing a session on well-being. And now I have to say I was a bit nervous. I was going down to half the people were trained therapists and counselors, and I was going to talk to them about well-being. I was like, oh my God, I'm in the wrong place. Like I'm speaking to the converted here. But at the start, so I was doing a bit of an icebreaker, and in the room were administrators, there was kitchen staff, all these kind of people, all these different people, as well as the counselors. And I went around the room, and the counselors would put their hand up and say, "My name is John, and tell me something interesting about yourself." Oh, I have llamas, or I'm a beekeeper. And all of the counselors had second lives because they needed to process the stuff that they were going through, so they needed a second life. But what really struck me is one lady put her hand up, and she said, "I am." She said, "Oh, my name is Mary, and there's nothing interesting about me." And that really, really struck me as startling. How can there be nothing interesting about me at all? And so we had to go, listen, okay, Mary, tell us something. Have you kids? Have you whatever it is? And she said, yeah, yeah, no, no, no. Okay, I have two kids and they're 16 and 18 years old. Okay, so there you go. There's something interesting about you. You're a mother. There's bound to be a whole life story and all that. And it struck me that she couldn't just, that she felt intimidated by everyone else, that I'm not interesting because I don't do these things. And yet, every single person at their core is interesting. I've yet to meet a person who isn't interesting. And I think that's something to take in. When we find people who we disagree with vehemently, there's something interesting about them. There's always something interesting, even for the reason that they disagree vehemently with us. That's interesting. What is the reason behind that? And if we learn to take the curiosity to that and not the anger and not the raw emotion, and we learn instead of reacting to what they say, and we learn to respond to what they say, suddenly we have a real conversation with someone, and that makes a huge difference.
It does, and that, like you said, it's when we get to know somebody and we are curious about somebody else, we can find something that either creates that opens us, that we can ask more questions to find out more, or we might find we have something in common, or we might find a way that their perspective has opened up your eyes, or we can start to have a little bit of an understanding of experiences that they're having. So just through being open to somebody else's point of view, I guess, it opens up so many opportunities or windows of thought or ideas. And I think that is part of just reconnecting. It's not judging somebody, especially not like, as they say, a book by its cover, and just judging somebody because they believe something that is opposite to you, but actually going beyond that and thinking or asking, well, why do you believe that? Where is that coming from? What has got you on that path? And I look at it this way, and just having discussions. And I think to encourage that more, especially in our communities, to have this openness and this willing to just try and see somebody from a different perspective. It doesn't mean you got to get on with everybody else. There are going to be people you might not get on with. There are going to be people who rub you up the wrong way and you don't necessarily want to be with them. But it doesn't mean that they are bad people.
Mhm.
It just means they're not your people, but you can still, in some ways, have a connection. You can still, I guess, be friendly or be polite. I think also there's very much this, this cancel culture, or this ghosting. And, well, you've said something that I don't agree with, unfriend or undisconnect, or whatever it is. Instead of looking beyond that, it's so easy to almost throw people out our lives. And yet I think it's so important right now with, I mean, there's almost this new epidemic of loneliness and mental health and everything. It all stems to not feeling connected to fellow human beings, not having that realization that we are different, but we are the same as well. I
Mm.
think
Are,
most people on this planet most probably bleed red. Or
mm.
as some people say, you put your trousers on one leg at a time. There might be some people with skills who can, do both. But the thing is when we really break it down, how different are we? And I think that's where we've almost got to go back to, let's take it down to, okay, the cellular level. Just find a way to, what do we have in common? How can we connect? Okay, now that we've had this connection, how can we build on that through community, through going and as I said, it's being that pebble, letting the ripples go out, and then seeing from there. Because this is just my opinion, but I think we as humans, we really need to have that connection. And I love how you are bringing that in and helping people to reconnect with themselves and who they are.
Mm. And I think that is one of the most important parts of it because it's very hard to connect externally if we're not connected internally. Um, because then we just other everyone else. A very interesting incident. I'm in a WhatsApp group of men, and there was one message that came through. It was late in the night on Saturday night, and I think maybe there was a pint or two had by the person who was sending the message, but the message was very accusatory of, yous aren't supporting me. I don't feel supported in this group, and these kind of comments. And the replies the next morning were, and I should add, this group is very interesting for when someone posts something negative, everybody learns. It's really interesting for that. Suddenly it becomes a learning opportunity. When everything is nice and clappy and everyone's saying nice things, we're all in a little echo chamber. But when someone posts something negative, oh, it just becomes so different. And loads of people responded to him. And one guy said it really well, just, you know, we're here if you reach out, but we don't know what you need. Like we can't support you if you don't say, I need support. We do reach out. We've said, hey, if anyone needs support, put your hand up. If your hand isn't up, we can't see it. You know, and another guy made an interesting point. It's the problem is not the external here. The problem is the internal, and that can be hard to see. And I think that's where an awful lot of our problems arise. Like, to bring it back, when Lenka was asking me about, when you're coaching and where you're coaching with people, I meet a lot of people and they'll tell me, oh, my problem is my job, my problem is my boss, my problem is my wife, my problem is, I go, wait a second, like, wow, every single thing's a problem. It's like, is everyone in a situation where everyone else is wrong, what does that usually tell us about the situation? And it's that actual taking responsibility for ourselves is something we don't do very often and we avoid as much as possible because it's hard. Like it's hard work. It's hard work being honest. It's hard work saying, well, actually, the reason why my life isn't going the way I want it to be is because of me. It's my fault. I'm actually doing this to myself. That's a really hard statement to say, but it's also a really positive thing to say because it's good news. If we're doing it to ourselves, that means we can change it. And that's really powerful. So, and that's what I love about that, right? When we come to the awareness, when we take that responsibility, from the awareness, there's so much potential and possibility. And I love that fact of things. Like nothing is defined. Nothing is defined. And as much as we like to think it's defined, and let's get scientific now for a second, right? We look at the world from a quantum perspective and we look at the world from a universal perspective. And they can't match the theories. They can't, there is no unifying theory because the more we look at it from a quantum perspective, the truer it gets, the more bizarre it gets, and the smaller it gets. And so we can't find the actual answer. So there is no answers. We've only ever, like science does, there's only ever the next theory and the most validated theory we have at the moment. But nothing is certain. Absolutely nothing is ever certain. And that can be a challenge, but that's also in a strange and odd way comforting because nothing's forever. Nothing is 100% real. The only thing that is our essence, the truth of ourselves, is the only thing that we can actually trust and rely upon.
And you brought up a memory of one of your posts recently on LinkedIn as well, where you were talking about anything is possible. And you were, looking back at one of your younger selves. I think you were talking about busking in Prague and in
Okay,
Vienna.
yes. Oh yeah.
Could you tell us that story? Because it touches on this element as well as anything is possible. We have the power of doing things. It is uncomfortable, it is scary, but we have the power. And I loved the story. And also the fact that, you were in Prague on a Charles Bridge or somewhere just busking in a very unique way, not in a way that when people say busking, you would imagine, guitar, singing, having some nice voice, some good songs. Like, tell us about that. That's a fantastic story.
Well, yeah. So as a busker, I cannot sing. I cannot play an instrument. I cannot dance. I cannot juggle. Well, I've tried to juggle. I can do two well. The odd time I can do three, but no, I don't have those skills. And I was in Prague with my friends. So at the time, what age was I? I was probably 21, maybe 20 or 21. And I was living in the Netherlands. I was living in a town called Leiden. And I was living and working in that town. And we had decided we'd go traveling to Eastern Europe for a couple of weeks. And we were in Prague. And we'd been in a couple of places. And I was saying, "Do you know what? I bet you I could busk. And I bet you I could make a living selling conversation." And he was like, "No, you can't." I was like, "Yeah, no, I bet you. I'm sure I could. I could sell conversation and make a living here." And he said, well, go on ahead and do it. And he was sick of me talking about it. So I said, fine, I'll do it. And so I got a sign and it said conversation for sale. And I got someone to write in a big black marker for me. And I stood on Charles Bridge with my sign and I stood there holding it. And people would walk by, and a few people thought, okay, here's a homeless guy begging because I probably, I was not the richest person in the world. I looked fairly disheveled at the time. And but some people would stop and would ask what's going on. And I had my list of topics, all the different things that I would talk about. Like, and if I remember, the economics of European integration was one of the topics because I was a economics graduate from university. Football, why am I doing this? The history of Ireland, the non-BBC history of Ireland, different topics like this. Some people would engage and speak and talk, and it was brilliant because immediately it raised their curiosity. They were like, "What do you mean conversation for sale? Why are you doing this?" The question I got asked the most was, "Why are you doing this? What are you doing this for? What's the point to this?" And that was really good because then you had really open conversations because people were curious. But some people did ask me on the post, like, were you not scared? Were you not frightened of doing that? And okay, there was no real danger, I didn't think. Now, the police did move me on at one point. They thought I was begging because they couldn't read the site in English. And I was trying to explain to them. And then they tried to talk to me, and I said, no, you have to pay for a conversation. And they didn't like that joke at all. But then it was kind of, there was no fear in it. And there was no fear in it because I wasn't thinking about what could go wrong. I wasn't thinking about what I had to be afraid of. Um, and look, I do a lot of public speaking coaching and stuff with groups, and an awful lot of it comes from if people arrive and they tell me that they're afraid. Oh God, Jesus, I can't do this. I'm gonna explode on stage, or my pants will fall down, or just the extreme version of what could go wrong in a public speaking situation. And look, I know so many people feel it. It's because we're so far outside of our comfort zone. And then I would say to people as I'm training them, going, "Am I confident?" And they go, "Oh my God, you're so confident." I say, "I'm not. I'm not confident." But it's like, we come into this conversation today, and I know before Andrew asked him, "Is there any topic you want to talk about?" I said, "No, no, we'll talk," because I do not for a second think I won't have anything to talk about. But if I came in here thinking I might not have something to talk about, I would have given you a list of 20 conversation topics just to make sure that I didn't fail. So I was trying to control the external situation. But what I actually do is I think about, well, what am I here to do? When I was starting conversation, okay, I have a list of conversations. I'm here to talk. If people talk to me, they talk. If no one talks to me, I stand there looking like an idiot for a couple of hours holding a sign. What have I lost? I've lost absolutely. And also, there's a freedom in it because nobody knew me. Nobody knew me at all. So there was a load of freedom in that. I think that's a lot of the thing for us when we live in that fear of doing something, because we're thinking about the fear of doing it. We're thinking about what could go wrong. We're not focusing on who am I? What can I do? What have I achieved today? What am I here to actually do? Because when we do it from that space, it's completely different. And it's open then. And that's a lovely, lovely place to be because we're also tapping into our core, our strength, and who we really are. Because when we come from who we are, it's back to that authenticity piece, things are completely different. But when we come from what we're afraid of, we're in trouble.
Well, it's an incredible story, especially for someone who is from the Czech Republic, who grew up here, and thinking about Prague in the 1990s or Czech Republic in the like late 1990s, early 2000s. Someone English speaking, even in Prague, in a it's still in my mind. Is like that's a different like doing it now. It would be very touristy, very English speaking, very international. But if I think a couple of years back, then like that's a very unique country to do this kind of a challenge that adds on top of the discomfort and challenge because Prague in that time would be a very different kind of a place. So great job for doing that. Well done. And it's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful lesson in there, of course.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I remember, and there was a few tourists were stopping, a few locals, and I remember one German family, and I had done German in school, so I can't say I could speak it very well, but I could understand spoken German to a degree. And this father, I remember him walking by and laughing. And then his kids could say to him in German, I can't say it now, why, what's so funny? And then he would say, "Oh, man is standing there with a sign that says conversation for sale." And then the whole family starts laughing at the fact that that's there. And for me, that was wonderful because, you know, our world needs more spontaneity. What's good about our world is where we can interact with it and enjoy it and enjoy what's new and what's different and what's exciting. And that's a lovely, lovely thing that happened. Like when I did the same thing in Austria, in I can't remember the name of the square now. I know I only wrote it recently, but I did the thing in Austria. I got offered a home to live in by a lady. And she actually thought I was homeless, so she was feeling sorry for me because her father had passed away and there was an apartment there, which always struck me. I've never forgotten that because it just struck me as the incredible generosity of that person to see this guy trying to do this in the street and thinking, "Do you need help? Can I come and help you?" Um, but doesn't it just go to show you the different experience when we approach the thing curiously and what may come and what may arise of it?
And it goes back to, when I brought the perspective, negative perspective earlier of, there could be a lot of negativity, there could be a lot of fear, there could be a lot of the other. And now you brought me straight back to thinking about one specific YouTube channel that's all about yes theory. It's all about, seeking discomfort. And they do wonderful stories all around the world of things of putting themselves in uncomfortable situation, but discovering the beauty and kindness and humanness and generosity of human beings of all walks of life, of all cultures, of all languages, anywhere around the world, and really proving that at the core, we're good people, we're a good world, we're good citizens, we're a wonderful species. There's so much goodness and love and generosity and support and opportunity in this world. So I love that we did like a 360 coming back to this kind of wrapping up with a very positive message of absolutely with a little bit of curiosity, with open mind, with bit of bravery, the world is our oyster and anything is possible.
And I love that. Like, it's something I often think about is there's people out there who are holding space in some of the harshest places in the world. And they have that level of positivity where they think someone else is worse off. And I love that fact that we can have that spirit of not being worse off. I'll give you some stories again. My father was an incredible influence of me, right? He passed away 22 years ago now, which is a lifetime at this point. But he had contracted cancer and he was very ill. And the local priest came to see him and say, "Look, I want to have a mass for you because you're sick." My father was like, "Wait a second. I'm not the only person who's sick. Like Mary down the road is sick, and then John in the lane is sick, and then a mile down the road and Tom is sick. Like, so wait a second, you are not having a mass for me. No way." And my dad was quite irate, like he was like a little bit offended. And so the priest said to him, I was sitting there listening to this, and the priest said to him, trying to save face, "Oh, well, look, isn't it terrible that what's happened to you?" And he said, "Well, why shouldn't I be the one who's sick?" I was like, it took me about 20 years to understand what he meant by that, to be honest with you, because at the age of what I was like 21, listening to it, like I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't want to be sick. And he was simply saying that I can't control the thing that has happened to me. It's outside of my control that this has happened. So why should I wish this to have happened to anyone else? All I can do is just deal with it in my own way. And he used to call to people's houses who were sick and say, "Listen, you're grand, you'll be fine. Like, let's get on with it." And like I suppose it's a huge mindset thing. And I'm I don't know. I've worked with a few Czech people as well, Lenka, and you don't have too dissimilar an outlook in the world to us Irish people. There's quite a similarity. You're more strict and more stern than we are. We're much softer and much more. "It'll be grand," than that, right? But I found, there's a thing that we kind of. Oh, I lost my train of thought there. We kind of run the idea of a positive mindset or a negative mindset, right? And I think in Ireland we're quite cynical, and we can't just switch on positively. Oh, everything's great, everything's fantastic, everything's marvelous. We're too cynical for that kind of thing to go straight away, right? What I often say to people is it's not about suddenly jumping into a positive mindset. It's about being realistic about our world. It's like I have a glass. Unfortunately, there's a bit less water in it than half a glass of water. You can hardly see it there because my camera's down. But it's like people go, "Well, is the glass half full or half empty?" It's neither. It's a glass. It has water in it. Why do we let the glass determine how we feel? The quantity of water should have no impact on our emotional level. Like it's an incredible thing to do to allow the amount of water in a glass impact us emotionally. Like there's an incredible power to give away. And when we think about it in those terms, so then it becomes more about it's not about if it's good or bad, it's just is. And how do I deal with what is? And that's kind of what my father was kind of saying on that, and that's kind of where I got that sense of entitlement. And maybe one of our issues in our world, and we won't go there, is there's a sense of entitlement among so many people. I am entitled to this and I'm entitled to that. We're entitled to nothing. We are entitled to absolutely nothing. Like we're lucky to have an awful lot of what we have. And once we can breathe fresh air and have food and have people and have a roof over our head, well, then that's lucky. Everything else is a bonus and a blessing on top of that. And I think there's a need for us, especially Natalie, and you were both asking about how do we avoid the negativity in the world, is to be realistic about where we are and what we are in the world. And it's like you mentioned, Natalie, and I'd love to know if I can't think of the name of it. There's a TEDx talk about a year ago, and it was something about the good news in the world. And this guy, he was only 8 minutes long, but he spoke about all the media is just the bad news. And he said like, and one of the things I do remember, he said in 2023 there was 800 million women or no, 200 million women was it under the age of 12 in education. In 2020, that was only 150 million. So therefore, in 4 years, there's 50 million more women. That's an amazing story. And he just gave us all these statistics for how the world is progressing in a very positive way. But that's not a good news story. That doesn't sell newspapers. That doesn't sit us down at 9 o'clock to go, that's exciting. But the world is progressing in a very positive way. There's loads and loads of really good things happening out there, but we just don't focus on them. And maybe if we focus on the good things, we'd feel different about it.
I love how yeah, we do. We need to look for the good things and find them. And there are people who are sharing the good news. It's not necessarily in the beginning the first place you will look. So it is, you do have to find it and then create the right sort of feed on your whichever social media platform you're on to receive more of the good news, because it is out there. We just got to find it. So I love that reminder. It's let's take responsibility and look for the good news and not just allow the bad news to hit us constantly. But we can find the good news if we want to. And I for good news, it's not necessarily news, but I've got a couple of channels that I watch on YouTube where there's just these two otters who swim and eat fish and are just so happy and loved. And I just think, yeah, that's what the world is about. It's about these animals who've been rescued and they just happy little otters swimming, and they get spoiled and they get their beautiful fish and they whine if they don't get a cuddle, and then they get cuddled and then they go to sleep and they're very happy. And I think that's what we need to do. We just need to remember that just we need our little swimming pools, we need our food, and we need a cuddle, and then we can go to sleep and we're all happy. So there's my wisdom on good news is these otters.
But isn't the truth an awful lot more simple than we like to think, you know? We complicate our lives in so many ways. But when it all boils down to it, it's simple. And like I was going to say this early on, and when we were talking about this conversation about connecting with yourself, right? And the journey, I remember reading this. I was about 17 or 18. I was reading about the shortest journey you'll ever go on is about this long. Just kind of nearly, the journey into your own heart, like, but it can take a lifetime. And I couldn't grasp that at all. I was like, what are they trying to say? Like, what does that mean? How do I make that journey? Where do I start? So I went and I looked everywhere else. And I looked all around the world for that answers to that journey. And I kept on going externally. And I was right till I eventually realized I wasn't finding it. And that is the truth of it. It is much more simple. But we like to complicate it because we don't think it can be so simple, because we feel that there should be more. It should be more dynamic and more complicated. But like, when you talk earlier, Lenka, you asked me, where do you work with people? Like, we work on people's values. What does really matters to people? How do you honor those in your life? It's simple stuff. Like, it's not complicated, but it's just the stuff that we've spent our life chasing other things, chasing the external, chasing the materialist culture that we are so bought into. And here I am, I have a nice phone here, and like I'll probably Amazon will ring the doorbell with my latest book arriving soon, because hey, we can't help being in our materialist culture to an extent, but it doesn't solve any problems. It doesn't really answer many of the questions for us. They're only answered by us, by who we are. And to finish on that point, right? There's a great book written in the 1780s, was it, by a French philosopher about trying to sit in his own room, traveling around his own room. And it's so true that if you cannot sit with yourself in a space, well, then you're always going to be in trouble. Once we learn to be able to sit with ourselves, and that is a very, very simple thing to just sit down. But now we don't, because instantly phone is in the hand. Oh my God, I nearly had a moment to myself there without being online or without distracting myself in some way. That's it. If we learn to sit with ourselves, life is unbelievable when we do that.
That's very powerful. And yeah, it is. We are so distracted by phones beeping, whatever's that it is. It's almost like the scary thing to sit with ourselves. But it's a good practice to start to learn to sit with ourselves and reconnect with that human. Hop on to our Patreon account to get this episode's amazing and wonderful gold nugget. So again, thank you for sharing your energy with us, your wisdom. But where can people find you if they're thinking, you know what, I need to find out more about this. I love this basking idea that was done. I think it's great. I need to pick Mark's brains about that. Or they just want to find out more about connecting with their human or just finding ways, but they want to come into your circle. Where can people find you?
Okay, so there's a few places. So you can find me online, obviously, on Mark Carolan Coaching. I'm on LinkedIn, and I have a website called Mark Carolan Coaching, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram, but I'm not very active there as Mark Carolan Coaching. But you'll also find, and this is what I love, I only had a post about this the other day. You'll find my TEDx talk under my name, Mark Carolan, and it's called The Magic of Being Yourself. So if you find it and you watch it and it resonates, send me a message. There's nothing I love more in the world than receiving a message from some complete stranger saying, "Oh, I loved that thing you said about this in that message." And if you also want to find me, I love mountains. So if you're ever in Ireland and you want to have a good chat about anything in the world, find me. We'll go up a mountain. We'll have a good chat.
Thank you so much. And we will have all your links. And I'm sure Lenka will find your TED Talk link that we can add so that people can connect with you. And yeah, it sounds amazing. And the power of the conversation is beautiful. So do reach out to Mark and let him know what you want to talk about, or just say that you've got some inspiration from this. So thank you so much for just sharing your time with us and your expertise and your perspective on how to have more life in one's life.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, Nelly.
And for our listeners, what have you got from today? Conversations are very, very powerful. And of course, Mark has even stood on Prague streets offering for people to have a conversation. And he's offered, if you're in Ireland, to have a conversation. But how many times do you just have a conversation with somebody to have that curiosity? We would love to know what your thoughts are on this episode and what Mark has shared with us. Do you find conversations easy and is something that you love doing? Or do you find it difficult to break that ice or start those conversations? We would love to hear your thoughts on what you got from this episode. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.